But because of a booming economy, for the first time since 1968, there was a budget surplus. By the way, that's not necessarily good for the economy. Every time there's been a budget surplus, it's followed quickly by a recession. But for the first time, and so Clinton vowed to do something about the budget, and you could argue it did bring down the balance of payments, but I just wanted to get that point. But the next president would pass huge tax cuts for the wealthy, and that budget surplus would go away like that. And so, where are we at? Is it inequality of wealth? That leads us right to the election of 2000. Oh, you know what else I don't have here? Yeah, one more thing about Clinton. Add one more thing. Clinton would be the second president impeached. There were attempts to find some kind of scandal on him. They never could find them. They never could find any evidence of a scandal while he was governor of Arkansas. None. Zero. But they did find, or he did lie about an extramarital affair he had in the White House. And they would use that as an excuse to impeach him, because he had an affair with an intern. He was impeached, but he was not convicted. And ironically, his popularity skyrocketed during the impeachment because it made it look like it was a political witch hunt. Which, yeah, it was, but that's why both impeachments, him and President Johnson, were political in reality and not crimes. All right, now let's get to the election of 2000. So the election of 2000, Clinton's Vice President Al Gore was a Democratic nominee, and the Republicans nominated the son of the former president, George W. Bush. And Bush was seen as kind of a lightweight, not very intellectual, but he had the advantage of 8 years of Democratic presidents, and Gore was kind of stiff. And so this election was going to be an incredibly close election. Incredibly close election. On election day, it all came up to Florida, how close it came. And originally, the networks called it for Bush, and then they came back and said, no, maybe Bush didn't win. So Florida became the key. Whoever won Florida would win the majority of the Electoral College. It came down to one state. Gore won the popular vote, but remember, that doesn't matter. And immediately there was talk about a recount, because in Florida they had all kinds of different ballots for every county. Some of the ballots were shockingly confusing. Some were misread, some were thrown away. A lot of people, like in one county, 4,000 people voted for the Workers' Party candidate, who had never gotten more than 10 votes before because the ballot was so confusing. It was just chaos. And Gore or Bush ended up winning by just a couple hundred votes. And so there was an idea for a recount. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. And in a 5-4 ruling, the Supreme Court ruled no recount. In a very controversial Supreme Court ruling, and Bush got Florida. In fact, the ruling was so controversial at the bottom, it said this case can never be used as a precedent for any other case in history. So basically, the Supreme Court picked Bush to be president. It's arguable how what the recount would have went. The odds are it probably would have went to Gore, but we're not sure. And that part is not as irrelevant as the fact, wow, the Supreme Court did something it's never done before. It decided an election. And so Bush came in, and Bush actually very cleverly acted like he won a big victory, and immediately pushed for massive tax cuts for the very wealthy, because there was a recession in 2000, 2001. And it was a different kind of recession. It took 3 years to get out of. It was a recession like they used to have before the New Deal. And he asked for tax cuts, and these were all supply side. They would all go to the wealthiest 10 or the wealthiest 1%, not all, but about 75%. And getting enough Democrats to peel off and vote for it, they passed it. This massive tax cut. And you can argue about whether or not deficits are good or bad, but they vowed that this would lead to economic growth. It did not. And the deficit got significantly bigger. significantly bigger. And therefore the debt got bigger. Tax rates are lower today than what they were when Bush came in. And then Bush actually was relatively unpopular in actually talking about war with China. Actually, it looked like we were going to go to war with China. Those seem like such quaint days, don't they? And then on September 11th, 2001, as a culmination of a whole series of events, the largest terrorist attack on American soil happened September 11th, 2001. And this was all stemmed back from the overthrow of government in Iran, the first Gulf War, supporting Islamic fundamentalists in Afghanistan, including guys like Osama bin Laden. But a group called Al Qaeda, I have it on there, don't I? I do not have Al Qaeda on there. All that means is the base. And it was a base to, the CIA supported base to recruit fighters against the Soviets in the Afghani war. They committed a terrorist attack in the United States. And their big issue was American support of dictators in the Mideast and our support for Israel and their occupation of Palestinian land. Yeah, there's no doubt they didn't particularly like the United States, but that wasn't the reason they attacked, just because they hate the U.S. It was a political, trying to make a political statement to destabilize America's position in the Mideast. And not to go into all the details of what happened, but they attacked the Twin Towers. In 1993, there was another attempted bombing of the Twin Towers. It failed, but they used it using planes as a weapon. They actually tried to use planes as a weapon to attack the Eiffel Tower back in 1998. So this was not a surprise, even though we acted like it was. They also hit the Pentagon, and it looked like the plan was actually for that plane to hit the Capitol and the other plane to hit the White House. The plane that was going to the White House went down in Pennsylvania. It seems like the passengers overpowered the terrorists. You had one less on that plane. And this will trigger, as you can imagine, I mean, with almost 3,000 people dying, the second bloodiest day in American history after Antietam, the Battle of Antietam in the Civil War. Why was that fun? But, yes, can't help it. But, this is going to trigger, at first, you know, after this initial coming together, but this idea of a desire for revenge, because it became very, very quickly clear that they knew about Al Qaeda. During the Clinton administration, they tried to knock out Al Qaeda a couple times and failed at it. So they knew it was them. And they were being, they had sanctuary in Afghanistan by the government there. Afghanistan was in the middle of the Civil War. And so 2 months after this, the United States joined the Civil War in Afghanistan. The group that sponsored him was these fundamentalist Muslims. Yes, the U.S. supported them 10 years earlier, called the Taliban. And they were allowing Al Qaeda to stay in there because they were helping them in the Civil War. So we just picked the other side of the Civil War. No, the U.S. did not invade Afghanistan. We joined the Civil War and helped one side win. It's much more complex. But then after that, Afghanistan evolved into, anarchy is the wrong word, but then we didn't know what to do. We had no idea what to do in Afghanistan. Now what? Osama bin Laden, there was a major screw up and he was allowed to escape into Pakistan. They did capture the Taliban, but that would begin a civil war in Afghanistan, or an insurgency in Afghanistan that is still going on as of 12/17 today. The longest war in American history continues, and we haven't found a way out. Don't invade Afghanistan. That is a good rule of thumb. That's the British in 1849. 12,000 went in, 1 came out. But back to this. So Afghanistan, and that is when, even though the economy was still going poorly, Bush turned his attention to Iraq. Remembering how Saddam Hussein was left in power, and there was a real embarrassment amongst a bunch of very conservative foreign policy leaders called the neocons, new conservatives, who thought the United States has got to show how strong it is and knock out Saddam Hussein to prove that you better buckle down under American rule, and then they would all become democracies. They thought it'd be like domino theories. domino theory. If Iraq was made to become a democracy, all the rest of the Mideast would follow. And so that's what the belief was. And so they began to drum up fear against Iraq. What they said is Iraq was involved, or they implied Iraq was involved in the attack on September 11th, and that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. And you can imagine how people, it took forever, well, never really recovered September 11th. It was such a shocking attack that people accepted it. And going into 2003, the majority of Americans wanted to invade Iraq, even though there's no evidence they had weapons or were involved. And in March of 2003, the United States invaded Iraq. Iraq had no army anymore after the war and after sanctions. And so they were relatively easy to defeat their army, but then that would evolve into an insurgency. And a civil war would brew in Iraq that goes on to this day. I'm not going to go into all the details of what happened in Iraq, but that would turn out to be not the quick and easy war that we thought. And no, democracy did not flourish. And the problems in Iraq would spread right across the border to neighboring Syria. And that's the problems in Syria directly because of that. A lot of people predicted that would happen, and just the timeline was never sure how long it would take. But predict this would kind of spread into more insecurity around. And it's something that we have not failed to win. And then Bush was reelected in the very close election in 2004, kind of the war election. But then Bush's reputation would take a major hit when Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. And because of budget cutbacks and in the federal government, as part of supply side economics, the U.S. effort to aid after Hurricane Katrina, especially in Mississippi and New Orleans, botched is not strong enough of a word. It was an absolute disaster. And hundreds would be captured or would be trapped and died in New Orleans. It was chaos. And after that disaster by the Bush administration, his popularity fell like a rock. That combined with the fact that he said he wanted to cut Social Security, his popularity dropped. And when Iraq evolved in the Civil War, Bush would leave office as one of the most unpopular presidents in American history. Kind of weird for a guy getting elected 2 terms, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of funny how that happens. Of course, you know, LBJ. And then, while that was going on, there was a massive bubble in the real estate market. And the reason why there was a bubble, I mean, there's lots of reasons, but what fueled it was in the late 1990s, there was massive, got to be down, deregulation. This is supply side or trickle-down economics. And Clinton, who was pretty darn conservative, would get rid of many of the most important of the New Deal regulations, especially the Glass-Steagall law. And this would help fuel a massive bubble in real estate values. Huge bubble. And all these, and bubble in different kind of financial instruments, which, trust me, you do not want to know right now. Do you really want to know about credit default swaps? Are you ready? Nobody wants to know that right now. Special topics, special topics. But what happened was, it was a bubble, and like all bubbles, it crashed. A recession began in 2007, but the financial bubble crashed in 2008. The worst economic disaster since the Great Depression. And it was worldwide economic disaster. And it was all those regulations gone. I know you could say that a lot of people just, well, I'm done with that. And so, with that, President Bush would sign or would get through a bailout. And they bailed out the banks that in a way caused the recession. And this would make sure that banks, basically would have banks to do whatever they want. They knew that if they could do whatever financial instrument they want, they would be bailed out. And would set a terrible precedent today. That bailout would be called the Toxic Asset Relief Program, TARP. I don't want to get into what a toxic asset is. No, you don't want to know. You don't want to know yet. I think because we talk about special topics and it just, it's awful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible. But I did not add a line there, but so stimulus. In 2008, and in a way it fit perfectly for Barack Obama. Barack Obama, as the Democrat, would be elected president, partially because the Republicans now are being blamed for Iraq, Katrina, and now the recession. And Obama had no real reputation to be able to come into office, and he would be the first American president with African descent. His mother was of European descent, his father was African descent, and the first American president. And if you would know anything about 20 years earlier, it's just absolutely remarkable. I'm still in awe by this. You spent half of your life with this, so it's not really that big of a deal to you. To me, it's like, wow. I remember when Jesse Jackson ran in '84 as the first major candidate for president as African American, and the attacks against him were unbelievable. So, of course, the attacks against Obama would be unbelievable too. He would get past a relatively small stimulus, kind of like what the New Deal was, but not quite. And it was big enough to stop the economic freefall. They were losing 500,000 jobs a month when he became president. That ended. The economy was stabilized, but it wasn't big enough to cause a recovery. And so we had an incredibly slow and painful recovery that still goes on to this day. The economy today is about $1.2 trillion smaller than what it probably should be. So what that basically is that means that the economy is smaller, and that will lead not so much for me, but for you, less opportunity. I'm sorry, but that's the way economics works. Yes, we could have done something about that. No, we chose not to. And the reason that we'll put for stimulus, after a year and a half, government spending dropped dramatically, and they cut back on spending. And so the stimulus ended, and so we had a very slow recovery. His biggest initiative was to do something that has been tried going back to Truman, LBJ, Clinton, and now Bush. And the plan was healthcare reform. In reality, it's insurance reform. It's insurance reform called the Affordable Care Act. But soon it would be dubbed Obamacare. And it really was a convoluted bill to reform the insurance market, to make it fair, allow for people to get much better insurance. People with pre-existing conditions would not be kicked off insurance, or not be able to get insurance, which was a huge problem. It also expanded like Medicaid. But the whole idea was to get more people insured, and it passed with absolutely no Republican support. And some Democrats were disappointed too because it was only a half measure. But the Affordable Care Act has had mixed results. I think net good, because the number of uninsured dropped by 2/3, but there's still a lot of people without insurance. The quality of insurance has gone up dramatically. Trust me, it's gone up dramatically. But at the same time, costs, even though they were somewhat controlled, still went up more than what they thought, and there were still holes in it. And Republicans would very effectively run against those problems and help get President Trump elected. But then, once he got elected, they don't know what to do with it because it's kind of a Republican bill. So, Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street would be did I say operate Law Street? Let's do the Tea Party first. And then I'll come back to Wall Street. How did I get Law Street out of Wall Street?
I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any
regulation. Yeah, I know, but my fingers must have really... What did you say?
I said, I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any regulations there.
Okay, so that's pretty good. I just don't want to give you credit. But what happened was this. The Tea Party really developed basically conservative Republicans. It was basically a wing of the Republican Party. They try to imply that they were outside the Republican Party, but they were quickly folded in, or they were always part of this conservative wing of the Republican Party. And basically their claim was the stimulus was too much, it's leading too much debt and anger against the Affordable Care Act. And basically it was for much more pushing for trickle-down economics and just dislike of President Obama. All you do is look at signs of some of the Tea Party rallies, and they're pretty disturbing. But this was conservative opposition, and there were some flaws with the bill, so they really focused on that. And that would help kind of refuel a Republican resurgence in 2010, 2014, and almost certainly would be the bulk of the support for President Trump. And so Occupy Wall Street was an opposite way, realizing that Wall Street would never really handle the issue. Occupy Wall Street was a massive protest based on, it was kind of loosely based on Martin Luther King's idea of a four-persons march on Washington, D.C., whereas originally just going to be kind of a plan where they would occupy, people protested the inequality of wealth in the United States, would just occupy for a couple days in front of Wall Street to try to get people to pay attention to this massive inequality and the deregulation of the stock market, and the fact that these guys destroyed the economy and were richer than ever before. It turned into 6 months of an occupation where they did not leave until the police finally ran them out. And they kind of devolved because 6 months through the winter, issues come up, I think you can probably guess. But it really brought to light the issue of inequality. And one of the big issues were a lot of them were college students and those who realized that in the years of trickle-down economics, college costs have more than went up by 350%. And this is a huge tax on young people. And yes, in Montana, it's going to go up another 22% next year. And so this is a huge tax on young people. And so that's what they were protesting. And so you're going to get this kind of this conflict where more and more the Democratic Party will finally be pushed back to its roots with the New Deal and kind of talk about economic inequality, while the Republican Party will push more towards trickle-down economics, and you get to this real divide. While this is going on, John Roberts was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court appointed by President Bush, and they would pass a series of 5 to 4 rulings. 5 to 4 rulings that would do a number of things. Most importantly, the Citizens United case. I was going to say if I put down Citizens Untied, that's what The Citizens United case said that essentially corporations were people, and therefore their campaign contributions could not be limited. Which, by the way, is a big deal. An economic entity that has one goal, to make money for its stockpayers, now has the same rights, if not more, than you do. You could argue that's a good thing or bad thing economically, but well, it's kind of startling. And this will change politics forever until this is overruled. And the amount of money now from corporations is absolutely overwhelming. Hundreds of millions of dollars come pouring in and nobody knows where it comes from. And also the Heller decision would reverse 70 years of gun control laws by a 5 to 4 ruling, totally reversing ruling on the Second Amendment, where they said, yes, government can control unusual guns, but it's implied that they meant people have individual ownership of some guns in the Second Amendment. Totally reversing years of precedent. It's a big deal. 5 to 4 ruling. So it's basically weird. It's the government can't control guns, but not all guns. All right, I almost got it all done. That's pretty good, right? We're through almost 20 years. That's a lot of stuff. Huh?
It's cheap. You gotta get the time to old fashioned like $20.
And so with that, tomorrow, and then I will tomorrow night. Have a good day. Oh, and also President Jackson was very disturbed when the Civil War started. Very, very disturbed when the Civil War started.
What, did a cannonball?
Yes, he was dead for 17 years, but it disturbed him.
Did a cannonball hit his grave or something? Did a cannonball like land in his grave? Just boom! Yeah, what was that? I'm sleeping.
There actually was almost no fighting around Nashville. Okay, as an historian, not really much. Sit down, get to work.
No, I think you went water down.
I need my water.
It's okay.
Why?
And have a chair. Oh, sorry.
Come on. I love that. Both feet?
Well,
one of those where you sleep on your whole leg falls asleep?
Hey, anyone up below?
All right, everybody, let's get to work. Will you finally leave?
No. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for you two, I always say that. You coming back.
I made cookies last night.
You know, the problem with this stuff is the run up to the test, we're trying to get everything in. It's exhausting. But also, it makes you review everything. Get your mind into it, you start thinking about it. I think
Yeah.
I think you're doing it again. But I'm gonna finish a couple things in class, but then we'll do practice tests for us a week. Yeah.
You want a peanut butter cookie?
No, thank you, but thank you. I do like peanut butter.
I want. I made like 4 dozen. Used to be a little bit, but it's 4 dozen. Oh, Mr. Good.
Oh, that was good for that. Yeah.
Since I was gone for my grandma's funeral, I missed the ACT, so I have to take it tomorrow. So that's where I'll be, but I have to be back here. So, because they're yelling at me for absences, and so I have to be back here. So I'll probably just be zoning out ish. I'll be taking notes.
That's
What?
kind of good. And then you take an AP exam.
I have.
Do you have any other AP exams?
No.
Oh, at least you only have one.
Yeah, but still, it's just a really stressful week. So I have to do stuff at lunch both these days, but my friends are helping me with the packet and
Okay,
everything.
good.
So I'm here. Just
You're the
really
best.
stressful week.
I wonder. Or at least you say like, I don't know how much extra. You might still let it take the AP test 2 weeks later.
AP.
Yeah. You have to be extra, and I frankly don't know how much more. 'Cause you
Yeah.
have to write a special test.
Yeah.
That's just for the stress level.
Well, I was thinking.
I don't know if it's too late to do that or not.
Yeah. Well, I'm okay with taking an AP test just because I've been studying and stuff and doing all the
Okay,
packets.
then let's do that then.
Okay, but for ACT, I was kind of thinking about retaking it a different